Imagine waking up tomorrow and Angela Rayner is Prime Minister. Not in 5 years, not after an election, but next year, in 2026, while Keir Starmer still got the removal van on speed dial and the carpets in number 10 are barely worn in. Sounds mental, doesn't it? Well, according to multiple political experts and Telegraph columnists, it's not just possible, it's pretty likely. Welcome to the absolute circus that is British politics right now. You're watching UK Political Insight, and if you thought Labour winning a landslide meant stability and boring competence, oh mate, have I got news for you. We're barely a year into this government and the knives are already out. The briefings are flying, and Keir Starmer's fighting for his political life, while Angela Rayner circles overhead like a very well-dressed, very ambitious vulture. Today we're diving into why experts reckon Rayner could be running the country within 12 months, how we got to this absolutely bonkers situation, and what it means for Labour, for the country, and for anyone who thought politics might calm down after the Tory psychodrama of the last few years. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. So let's start with the bombshell that's got Westminster chattering like a bunch of caffeinated parrots. On the Telegraph's Daily Tea podcast, political columnist Camilla Tominey dropped this absolute grenade. Lucy Powell, the new deputy prime minister, is apparently maneuvering to chicken run into a seat after the May elections to challenge Starmer. And if that wasn't juicy enough, journalist Alistair Heath said Angela Rayner is Starmer's most problematic rival, and there's a high chance she becomes prime minister next year. Not might, not could, but a high chance. Those are fighting words in the world of political punditry. Tim Stanley, another Telegraph columnist, agreed, saying he thought the probability of Rayner becoming PM before the end of this parliament is pretty high. And Annabel Denham, the Telegraph's senior political commentator, chimed in saying Rayner is definitely the biggest one to watch. So we've got multiple serious political observers, not conspiracy theorists in tinfoil hats, saying that within 12 months, Angela Rayner could be sitting in number 10. That's not speculation anymore. That's a genuine political possibility that's being openly discussed. Now, before we get into how this might happen and why everyone's suddenly talking about it, let's address the elephant in the room. Angela Rayner resigned from government in September 2025. She quit as Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Housing after a report concluded she'd broken the ministerial code by underpaying stamp duty on a property purchase. She admitted it, took responsibility, and walked. That should have been the end of her frontline political career, right? Disgraced minister resigns, fades into backbench obscurity, maybe does some after-dinner speaking. That's normally how this works. Except politics doesn't work normally anymore, and Angela Rayner definitely doesn't follow the normal script. Instead of disappearing, she somehow becomes stronger. Tim Stanley said it perfectly, stronger for having resigned. She had an amazing conference, and she didn't even go to the conference. Think about that for a second. She resigned in disgrace, didn't even attend Labour conference, and yet she's emerged as the biggest threat to the Prime Minister. That's not how political gravity is supposed to work, but here we are. So how did we get to this absolutely wild situation where a resigned minister who broke the ministerial code is now being tipped as the next Prime Minister? Well, buckle up, because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Let's rewind to the beginning of Labour's government, back when Keir Starmer won that landslide and everyone thought we were entering an era of sensible, boring, competent governance. Remember those heady days? They lasted about 3 weeks. Since then, it's been an absolute disaster. The winter fuel payment cuts that angered pensioners, the family farm tax that sparked mass protests and had to be partially reversed, the gift scandal where ministers were accepting designer clothes and Taylor Swift tickets, the Sue Gray debacle where the Prime Minister's chief of staff became more toxic than a Chernobyl swimming pool and had to be moved sideways, the PIP cuts that got shelved, the grooming gangs inquiry that was resisted then announced. It's been U-turn after U-turn, scandal after scandal, own goal after own goal. And through all of this, Keir Starmer has looked increasingly weak. Not just unpopular, but weak. There's a difference. Unpopular leaders can survive if they look strong and decisive. Margaret Thatcher was deeply unpopular during the Falklands War until she won. But weak leaders don't survive because weakness attracts challenges like blood attracts sharks, and the sharks are definitely circling now. Here's what's really damaging for Starmer. He lost the deputy leader election. The Telegraph columnists mentioned this, and it's absolutely crucial. After Angela Rayner resigned, there was a contest to replace her as deputy leader of the Labour Party. Starmer presumably backed someone, and that someone lost to the soft left candidate. So the prime minister couldn't even get his preferred choice elected to a position that's essentially symbolic. If you can't win internal party elections when you're the sitting prime minister with a massive majority, you're in serious trouble. And then there are the leaks. Oh boy, the leaks. Starmer himself told the Commons Liaison Committee that speculation about leadership challenges is rife, and briefings against cabinet ministers and budget leaks are completely unacceptable. He said he had no reason to think number 10 staff were involved, but would act if necessary after an inquiry. Let's translate that from political speak to English. The government is leaking like a sieve, nobody trusts anyone, and the prime minister can't control his own operation. That's not the sign of a strong leader in command. That's the sign of a wounded animal. So we've got a weak prime minister, a government in chaos, terrible poll numbers, and a former deputy prime minister who's somehow become more popular and powerful after resigning. Now let's talk about why Angela Rayner specifically is such a threat, because this isn't just about Starmer being weak, it's about Rayner being a genuinely formidable political operator with a compelling story and a base of support that Starmer can only dream of. Angela Rayner has been the Labour MP for Ashton-under-Lyne since 2015. She's from a working-class background in Stockport, left school pregnant at 16 with no qualifications, and worked her way up through the trade union movement to become one of the most powerful politicians in the country. That's a genuinely inspiring story, and it's one that resonates with Labour's traditional base in a way that Starmer's establishment lawyer background just doesn't. She's also authentic in a way that's rare in modern politics. Love her or hate her, you know where you stand with Angela Rayner. She says what she thinks, doesn't do political speak, and comes across as a real person rather than a focus-grouped robot. In an era where voters are sick of polished politicians who sound like they're reading from a script, that's a massive asset. She connects with people, particularly working-class voters in the North and Midlands, in a way that Starmer simply can't. And here's the really interesting bit. She represents a different vision for Labour. Starmer's Labour is centrist, managerial, focused on competence and not scaring Middle England. It's basically Blair without the charisma and the economic boom. Rayner's Labour would be more left-wing, more redistributive, more focused on traditional Labour values. She's the candidate of the Labour left and the trade unions, the people who never really trusted Starmer and have been looking for an alternative since he became leader. So you've got this perfect storm brewing. A weak prime minister who's lost control of his government, a chaotic administration that's lurching from crisis to crisis, terrible poll numbers that have Labour MPs in marginal seats absolutely terrified about losing their jobs, and a former deputy prime minister with a compelling story, a strong base of support, and nothing to lose because she's already resigned. That's not just a potential leadership challenge, that's a leadership challenge waiting to happen. Now, let's talk about how this might actually happen and why everyone's suddenly talking about it. Because you can't just wake up one morning and declare yourself prime minister. There's a process, and it's actually pretty brutal. For Angela Rayner to become prime minister next year without a general election, she'd need to win a Labour leadership contest. That means either Starmer resigning voluntarily, which seems unlikely, or enough Labour MPs losing confidence and forcing him out. Here's how that could happen. The local elections in May are going to be brutal for Labour. They're defending seats they won in 2021 when they were in opposition and doing well. Now they're in government and deeply unpopular. They're going to lose hundreds of council seats, maybe even lose control of some councils. That's when the panic really sets in among Labour MPs. If local elections are this bad, what happens to the general election? After May, you'll have terrified Labour MPs in marginal seats looking at the poll numbers and thinking we're going to lose our jobs if we stick with this guy. That's when the briefings intensify, the WhatsApp groups start buzzing, and people start having quiet conversations about whether it's time for a change. The phrase you'll hear is, "for the good of the party." Nobody wants to be the person who wielded the knife, but everyone wants Starmer gone. This is where it gets really interesting, because Labour has this unique system where you need MPs to nominate you, but then the members vote. So Rayner would need enough MP nominations to get on the ballot, and then she'd need to win the membership vote. The first part might be tricky because a lot of Labour MPs are Starmer loyalists, or at least people who owe their careers to him, but if the panic is real enough after May, if MPs genuinely believe they're going to lose their seats, loyalty goes out the window. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. And here's Rayner's ace in the hole. The Labour membership loves her. She won the deputy leader election back in 2020, and she's remained popular with the grassroots even after resigning. If she gets on the ballot, she wins. It's that simple. The members would choose her over any Labour loyalist candidate, and probably over anyone else in the cabinet. She's got the left, she's got the unions, and she's got the northern MPs who feel ignored by Starmer's metropolitan focus. But there's another route to power that's even more dramatic, and it's the one Camilla Tominey hinted at with Lucy Powell. If there's a proper civil war in Labour after the May elections, if multiple candidates throw their hats in the ring, you could end up with a chaotic multi-way race where nobody has a clear majority. That's when backroom deals get done, when factions start trading votes, when someone who wasn't even the front